Welcome to a podcast version of the Collingwood Rant. I'm Sly.
And I'm in isolation, Spook, again.
So I think Spook's just explained why this one's a podcast. And
Yep,
just as well,
after 2 years, the spicy cough finally found me.
you did say cough, didn't you?
Yeah. Just to let everyone know, though, but I've had splinters worse than this, so probably safe to move on.
All right, so absolutely appalling Friday night, but that's enough about James Brayshaw's commentary. The game itself wasn't very good either. Spook, your thoughts?
It certainly wasn't. Oh, sorry, you said thoughts.
Yeah.
I just gave it to you. No, it wasn't.
That was it?
No, I think that's in terms of disappointing losses this year or lack of effort, I think nothing will ever top that West Coast game, but this was pretty close.
Maybe they all had flu.
Yeah, well, I think, and that may well be the case, but Fly's used illness for an excuse 2 weeks running. I don't think you were going to see it pulled out for a third week. I think, it's pretty much like what we've always spoken about is that the harsh reality of where we're at is rapidly catching up with us. It was great to have the season start that we did. And, we joked a little bit about, how exciting all that sort of was. But I think the reality of the situation has come home to roost, and it's not pleasant, is it?
Oh, look, I've been saying the whole year we're a bottom 6 team. So if anyone was out there after 3 wins against mediocre opposition going, hey, it's all good at Collingwood and we'll play in the grand final, we were grounded. That was delusional. And we actually seen the lack of depth now. And as you might have mentioned, that probably some of these games, the coaching staff should be looking at it and saying, some of these guys might not be taking us into the future.
Oh, no, definitely not. And I guess, the other disappointing thing is, look, we rolled quite a few dice last year, and we went deep into the draft in the second round section. It's just no one's really standing out.
Well, let's look at some of these players. So, and not suggesting we're going to write any of these guys off because it is early.
Definitely not. No.
So Bo McCreary, only 3 disposals, which, is not a great return. And throughout since his return from injury, I think he actually had one game where he was really inaccurate, but he is habitually a low disposal earner, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think, especially with him, he was one that I really thought he just had that really bullocking, attacking style that I thought, there's something's there.
He's another one where I think if we had a better forward setup, he'd profit from it.
But I think the get out of jail for every player we're about to talk about is going to be that the support around them is just non-existent. And you wonder also too whether, and we'll cover this a little bit more too, but how much this is impacting the development as well.
Well, that was
it's
the
like
thing.
Everyone's sort of stuck in a holding pattern.
Finlay McRae. I mean, this is one guy that's concerning me because I have not, like each of the players, even McCreary, is a low possession getter. I've seen something at AFL level, and McRae just doesn't seem to have that much presence. Now, he might develop it. He puts on size, endurance, and all that. But he was... Actually, let me just backstep too. It's ludicrous that they played him as the medical sub. I thought that was a bizarre decision. Either he sits out the whole game, then what do you do? You send him back to the VFL, or does he miss the VFL? I don't know what the... It's like if you're going to bring someone up from the VFL, surely you just bring him straight into the side. Otherwise, what's the point of bringing them up just to sit on the fucking bench potentially for the whole game? Unless McRae's like, the coach McRae, he's like, we'll get an injury. We're Collingwood.
Well, it is a Monty.
Yeah, but I just haven't seen anything. Like I heard like a lot of raps about him at lower levels. I was thinking, okay, this is what we need, but I just haven't seen any glimpses of that.
No, I think I might have been talking to you about it over the message there on Friday, but he has these standout breakout, whatever type performances at VFL level. And how many games has he played now? It's not heaps.
It's only about 10 or something.
Yeah, but none of them. Can you remember anything? One highlight?
No, well, comparatively,
he comes into the senior stuff and just vanishes.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I think. I mean, he got 4 disposals. Comparatively, you look at someone like Caleb Poulter, who he wasn't brilliant, but when I've seen him, it's like, oh, he's got something. He reminds me a little bit of Gavin Krasiska. So that's what you're going to see. You want to see glimpses of something. Now, again, and Finlay McRae might put on size and endurance and all that, and then just explode.
Well,
But
literally.
I really would be concerned because these are the guys you traded out Treloar, Stevenson, and Phillips pretty much for. And you need, I reckon, over half of them to at least become solid contributors. You need a couple of them to become elite. And none of them are looking like, a lot of them are looking like they're not even going to become solid contributors. I mean, it might change again. But, looking at what we see, it's like, geez, it's not like when you go back, and you saw like glimpses of potential in some like Herity Lamumba or Alan Tuvey, early in their careers. Callum Brown.
what would you like to know?
Is his time done?
It's oh fuck. I mean, seriously, no, yes, definitely. I think just too short, no weapons. It's become absurdly rinse repeat. The performances, it's got a. I just can't see a future there. He's played more than enough games to say something, and I'm not saying it. It's just no good.
Well, he's actually an interesting one because I think early in his career he showed something and he's just really deteriorated. And I think that's a result of 2021 and 2020 when they persevered with him when he was obviously horribly out of form. I mean, the guy's now 24. He's played 68 games. His first 2 years, he showed a lot more than he's shown in the next 3 years. So what's happened there? And you look at something like, there's a couple of games I remember in 2019 when we played Sydney over there at the SCG and it was close, and one of the later ball ups, he won the clearance and instead of panicking, he streamed out of the centre and he had the composure to drill a goal and pretty much seal the game. And he was doing that back then. But he's just become nervous and indecisive and scrappy. It's really I don't know if it's just that he's been ultimately found out at this level, but I really think that he was out of form and the previous brain trust just persevered with him like they expected him to find it, and they've just introduced all these bad habits into his game. Not that I don't think he's going to be a world better or anything, but I think he's better than what he's been showing.
Yeah, good luck with that theory.
Isla Brown?
Look, I actually thought he was probably one of the more players that tried. You look at him and you're thinking, you're building a good size. You could be a good bullocking mid. He did a couple of nice things. He did a couple of fuck ups, which is what you're going to get. I probably thought he was one of the, and I'm using the term loosely, one of the better players on the night in a nothing performance. I still think he's someone you got to persist with.
Well, he's only on 22 games and he's obviously had a very interrupted development pathway. Your favourite, Will Hoskin Elliott?
No, put a line through him. I just, this is like borderline farce. And look, I surely the only reason he's getting the game is because there's just nothing else in that sort of age bracket to slot in with. But it's just it's not even cameo performances. It's just really truly watching it's a H.G. Wells novel in the fact that it's the invisible man out there. He'll bob up every now and then once he realizes the invisible cloak's been pulled off. He'll just happily pop it on and then just vanish again. He doesn't impact on anything. He'll kick the odd goal, but that's about it. It's just, this isn't the way forward with that type of player. You can't keep giving him games. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it's disappointing because he's got a lot of tools. He just doesn't seem to actually.
And he's one that I wanted to be epically good. It's just a nothing player.
Well, he's played 165 games, and the bulk of those are at Collingwood. So he was an early draft pick. He was a pick 4 from memory.
Yep.
So
he ticked all the boxes for what we needed at the time. But no, I've seen enough. Move on.
Ollie Henry.
Fucking hell. what is going on in that head? Yeah, it was literally a tale of two cities. Like I really liked the way that he was pulling down contested grabs and finding and leading into space and stuff. But as soon as he had to drop that ball onto the foot, fucking hell, it was pinball machine city. He was all
I
over the shop. Like
I
his
would
confidence. I don't know why would his confidence be that shot?
well,
He
I
kicked
was
the
going to
bag in the
suggest that. Yeah,
VFL about 2 weeks ago.
I would be
It's not
really
like he's been
worried.
emotionally scarred by anything. It's just absolutely baffling.
Well, he's a Collingwood, so that is a bit of an emotional scarring. Uh, I would actually be worried. So he found the ball okay. He didn't execute that well. The way he shanked it several times, not just once, and then there was one time he tried to lay off to the gully,
Oh, that was moronic.
and it wasn't just moronic; it was so poorly executed. Like the ball barely got a couple of feet off the ground and dropped short and wide of the gully, and then that was pretty much the turning point too. That was like it was competitive, and I think Dogs have got a couple of goals, have got a couple of points, and then Henry took that mark, and it was like, okay, just put this through, and it's a 1-goal game, and instead he did that really bad pass to the gully, and then the Bulldogs went down the other end and they scored, and that was the beginning of their run. And like I've always believed, you fail catastrophically, it's almost like just a momentum turner, and people start dropping their heads and going, fuck, it's not our night, or it's not our game, and all that sort of shit. Don't want to put all that on him, but I'm going to do it. He is seriously playing like someone's gotten in his ear and said, don't do this, do that. And he's like, I'm not playing my natural game. I'm playing something else, and I don't know how to reconcile it.
Everything.
Yeah, and that's my worry with, again, you go back to the Callum Brown. It's just obviously players, they've played like, I don't know, 10, 12 years by the time they get to this point, because they're always playing club football and shit. They've played competitive sports. They know their game. It's up to the coaches to develop their weapons and round out what else they have. But that was a really concerning game for me, because for him to be that disastrously bad in front of goal. And there's that pass to the gully too. That's one where it's like, mate, go back and just fucking kick it. I don't give a shit if you miss it. This is your time to shine. And he laid it off.
For it though. He flagged that he wanted it. I mean, fuck, he was only 30 meters out. You should just fucking.
But this is the thing that Henry, I know De Goey's a senior player, but Henry should just be going, no, I'm having the shot.
Yeah, back yourself. Yeah. It's that self-belief that's more of a powerful mental tool than anything.
Yeah, so I really, really am with your concern. I'll be curious how he comes out next week, because that was the sort of game where you think, are you going to become the next Hoskin Elliott? So I think that's the majority of players. De Goey's the other one. Matthew Lloyd gave him a pasting on the Sunday Footy show about he's not that great a player. He's just solid. I mean, a month ago, before De Goey got the gastro, whatever it was, his numbers are comparing with Petrarca, but now suddenly he's just an average player.
You're only as good as your last 5 minutes, though.
And he hasn't looked the same since that gastro. I'm not making excuses. I mean, who knows how much it's knocked him about.
No. And he's the sort of player I just don't think he's ever going to be like the beacon of hope. I think in a good side he'd perform superbly. He just doesn't. He's just not that sort of player that's just going to grab the game by the scuff and win it off his boot. He'll have those flashy cameo moments, but he needs to be part of a bigger machine, I think.
Well, the other thing you might look at is if he's not going to be the mid that you want, then he definitely can be the forward you want, because he's shown that. So
he could also be your most likely trade option at the end of the year too, if you want to bring in a couple of first rounders. I think, we got 2 options with him, I think, at the end of the year, obviously, because he's a restricted free agent. So he'll get offers. There's no doubt about that. I think Saints have already come out and said, well, there's the rumor that they're throwing money at him. But I think the problem for us is about how, if that's the case and he opts to go, how do you strategically play this out? Because if he walks as a restricted free agent, we get compensation. But I believe then that gets, like if we went out and got McStay, for argument's sake, we then deemed to have gotten something of quality in return, because he's a restricted free agent as well, that it negates then that need to compensate with picks. It would be far better if we traded him at the end of the year and got a couple of first rounders. But I think, there's a little bit of me that's sort of starting to think that maybe that's something the club is considering.
But the thing here is, you got to get McStay. He's 26 also. So,
Well, and the thing is, I don't see any sense in chasing someone like that. If you're going to offload to Goey with that with that mentality, because like I think it's going to be fucking pretty clear now that the actual real rebuild doesn't start till next year.
well,
What are you
this
going
is
to get out of loading up on a 26-year-old
well,
forward at the moment? You
I'm,
better off going to the draft or getting younger players and then building that age profile into a developing rebuild.
well, unless they did something like they did in 2000, 2001 when they got Clement Holland, Steinfurt, Malloy. I think I'm missing on Wakeland. They pumped in all these relatively experienced players, and that just, that addressed our bad list management up to that point, which really lacked that core to the list. And we've got the same problem here, and particularly because we traded out players and others didn't work out, like Scharenberg and all that. And it's like you got that again, that top end of, at 28, 29, you have Adams and Grundy, and then you got the real old guys in their 30s with Pendles and Howe and Rufford. And then you just got this chasm to the young guys. And it's like you're really missing out these 24-year-olds, like these solid contributors to good contributors. So, I mean, the one guy, our best player on the night was probably Adam Treloar. He, I think, showed some people he does know how to use the ball if he's given the opportunity. He played a really damaging game, and he's the sort of guy that we're actually missing. The Treloar Stevenson, that shows that bad list management because we've just bit that chunk out of the list.
Yeah. Look, I wouldn't. And look, I think Treloar had an exceptionally good game, but I think you and I probably could have had an exceptionally good game against that level of opposition. Yeah.
Look, to be fair,
I don't want to take it.
I would have had a good game if I was playing for Collingwood because, and just finally, Aiden Begg.
What I liked about his first game was he, even though he lost all the ruck contests, he was bringing the ball sort of down to himself to at least offer a contest. He did dish out a couple of handballs and stuff. He's just vanished since then. But that's understandable. He's a third game, and I think he was exceptionally raw and lucky to get in. I don't think we'll see him again this week. Probably the week after when we have 12 decimated injuries on against Freo this week. And they'll play him through need. But I think that little experiment is over. He's better off going back to the VFL, getting some touch there and start learning how to apply the trade. The sad thing is, who was the Footscray ruckman?
I don't know.
Fuck, and again, he made Cameron and Begg look like first game is the fact we get smashed in the fucking clearances and we're not getting any first use of the ball out of the ruck. It's I just don't think moving forward you can go with the Cameron Begg thing. I think they'll realise it this week that you're just going to have to go with Cox until Grundy gets back.
Yeah, well, I think the thing also to look at is this has been happening all year. This is happening when Grundy was there. Their centre clearance setup, whatever you want to call their midfield setup, it's terrible. There's just so many times, and it's not just this game. You go back to that Geelong game where they kicked, where it was 6 goals up and they turned it around. How many times one of their mids got the ball in totally open space and was either able to stream forward or pass it to a teammate and they were able to stream forward? It's just absurd. And similarly with the defensive zones where we see how often it's going into defense and how much space there is there. This formation, I don't know what they're trying to fucking do, but it's not working because it's just giving opposition so much real estate to navigate. It actually reminds me of, it was a few years ago when Buckley was coach. I just remember games where, teams were able to chip it around. We had no one within about 5 meters of, intercepting or even applying pressure. It was just so easy. It's back again. And I'm really curious, is this, again, something that's failing to gel, or is this just a really fucking bad idea, whatever they're doing?
Part of it is, I think, the problem is that they've been playing this way for so many years. And Fly's come in and look, we've gone to a little bit more of an attacking game plan and stuff, but essentially all the cattle are still in their same positions. I think when you're not really shaking the structure of the side up that much, that it's easy to fall back into habit. You know, I think that's
I
that's
don't
part
think
of it.
I don't think it's habit. I think this is their responsibility entirely. You can't blame Buckley for this. You can blame Buckley for their sideways and not moving it as quickly because they fall into that trap because they were playing that way for 10 years. The way they're setting up is terrible. And if there was one thing Buckley had, he had, good defensive pressure ultimately. This is whatever they're doing. Now it's just a question of, is it not working or is it something that's going to take time to develop? The amount of times opposition ruck, not just this game, but the whole year. And that's where we've talked about the momentum swings. When those momentum swings have happened, we've barely touched the ball. Teams have kicked 5-6 goals and we've barely touched the ball. So it's like, in the Buckley side, those sort of swings wouldn't happen. Not saying that was the right way to play because he just went ultra defensive, but their setup, whatever it is not working. And they have to, again, is it a plan that's still going to gel? Is it a lack of personnel or is it just a fucking setup that just doesn't work? We saw that under Buckley for 5-6 years.
What are we, 6 or 7 games in? You've really got 9 games, whatever. It's you still got to be waving that early days flag, and it may not be gelling, it may not be clicking, it may not be executed particularly well, but it's still very early in the piece.
Oh, look, it is early, but I don't want to be having this conversation
with very limited cattle as well.
I don't want to be doing this like we did with Buckley for 4 years. It's like, well, this isn't working. And it was like, when's it going to work? And it was always, it's about the execution. And Buckley's even said it in commentary at times. It's like, sometimes it's about the failure to execute. So, firsthand, because you had a conversation with a Carlton player about one of their previous coaches, that sometimes the game plan just doesn't work. It doesn't.
Too complex.
Or, whatever the reason. So I'm really concerned in the 9 rounds, not just this game. This game was just at the pinnacle of it. But in the 9 rounds, there has been large chunks of evidence to show that our defensive zones or accountability is just so far off where it needs to be. And it's a query of like, well, what are we seeing here? And hopefully it's just something that's still evolving, but I am worried.
Times too, where they were made to look so panicky. The amount of fucking times that you could not hit your own teammate with a handball was embarrassing. It was just staggering to watch. Just the simple lack of skill. You think, well, what do you do at training? I mean, every time the social media department puts up a video of training, they look like a well-oiled machine. But I guess that's what when there's no pressure around, it's easy to look like the Globetrotters. But they wilted, and some of the fact that you couldn't handball 2 meters and not hit someone, or you're thrown at their feet and all that sort of stuff. It's just, and I guess, how do you learn how to weather that type of pressure when it happens?
I don't know.
How do you sort of stay calm and just sort of do what you're drilled to do?
I'm not going to name who they are, but looking through that team that they field, I reckon there's 11 players who are not ready for their AFL. Now you can carry maybe 3 or 4 if you've got a much better senior framework. But this is, I think, showing the vulnerable underbelly of Collingwood. And if they get a couple more injuries, they're going to be spiraling down to the bottom spectacularly.
Look, and again, look, it's easy to make excuses, and we've had no VFL competition for 2 years. You really haven't been. Some of these kids haven't had the opportunity to develop outside of getting senior game time. Because look at, I couldn't work out why Poulter couldn't get a game, and I thought he was probably pretty good the other night, without setting the world on fire. But he just gets to the ball, and he's pretty calm. He's just. I really like him as a player, and I think, why were others getting a game ahead of you? That's the guy that you want to develop. And maybe some of that was, you can't take everything for granted. You've got to earn your spot. There must have been something that was that he was doing that wasn't, making him happy, and they wanted him to develop something inside of the VFL. But again, you look at him and think, I just don't want to see you go back. I think your best place is to learn inside of that senior framework.
Oh, look, I agree. I wouldn't have played the 2 Browns for 11 rounds. I would have just said, look, these guys haven't been that great for a couple of years. Let's just let them get their footing at VFL level. And guys like Poulter, Trey Risco, if he's fit, you know, I would have said these are the guys I'm going to bring in because they were actually showing at AFL level that they got something. And even someone like Finlay Macrae, I would have even said with him, let's just play him for a month. Just tell him, if you got a month to earn your spot, go for it.
And I was going to say this before too, and that's the thing I don't get is like he's played 10 games, Finlay, and I don't want to use him as a specific example, but this is like generally that period of player in general, is that your opportunities are fairly fucking limited. You know, you've got to grasp them when they're given to you. I just don't understand why they don't play out of their skins. I think if it was me, I'd be thinking, I don't want to go down again. I want to stay here. I'm going to bust an absolute nut. But you don't tend to see a lot of that application. I mean, a lot of it's obviously you're trying to play a role that you're allocated, or you're working within a team structure. But sometimes just fuck it, do what you're good at, and unleash, get noticed.
Look,
something spectacular.
I think part of the problem though here is it's they're setting up in the way that if you're a mid, you're just getting slaughtered. It's hard enough as it is. You know, you look at the guys like Taylor Adams and De Goey who are the senior end and they're struggling. And you think, well, what if you're one of these lower players? And that setup, just from what I'm seeing, is totally fucked up. Again, it's just a question of, is it going to evolve, or is it just they have a flawed ideology about what's happening? I mean, do you still, I mean, I was told, because I don't go read it, but I was told that Big Footy's turning on Macrae. So do you still have confidence in his vision going forward?
Oh, I have to. I like what I hear, and I like some of his philosophies, and the pedigree should be there. It's a very difficult side to work with. You are really, and I said, look, I said before, I think the rebuild officially starts next year. When you look back to when Malthouse started in 2000, half the list was cut, and pretty much the other half was cut a year later. I just don't think you can afford to do that these days because of the pandemic and everything, and the lack of seasoned talent out there is diminished. I think a lot of cards were probably marked at the start of the year. You're going to be given a year to prove yourself, but I think there'll be a fair old scythe swing at the end of the year. And then, as I said, the rebuild will start in earnest, and I think then you can judge Fly a little bit harsher, or hopefully quite well. Because
look, the one thing I'll say though is, I know the popular belief is Malthouse inherited a basket case because he cut 25, 30 players in the first 2 years and all that. But he actually inherited a really good core, because if you look at that side, if you look at
and that's a good point.
If you look at the spine, you had Tarrant, Rocker, Prestigiacomo, you had Shawbull here, who they traded and one of the best and fairest at Sydney, I believe. You had Mark Richardson there. You had Mal Michael there, who was then go on to Brisbane, playing their 3P. And then in the midfield, you had Buckley, Burns, Lucuria. You were going to get O'Brien, and you also had picks 1 and 3. So you had a really good core. Macrae doesn't have that. Macrae, after Moore, who's your next key position player?
Yeah, there isn't one.
Yeah, who's
certainly not at the moment either.
Yeah, who's your next prospect? I mean, you're talking about guys like Ash Johnson, who was a mid-season draft and has torn the hamstring from the bone. You're looking at Aiden Begg. You're seeing how far off he is. We were saying that last week. He's just too raw at the moment. That Liam McMahon hasn't had a look in. So Will Kelly just can't.
Dean, they were hanging their hat on, and he's how old was he? 23-year-old.
Yeah.
VFL player. It's hopefully he ends up being an absolute gun, but you're really casting the net wide.
Yeah, so Malthouse, when you inherit these players, Tarrant, Rocker, Prestigiacomo, they'd all played for a while. Mal Michael was, he had 20, 30, I can't remember what it would be exactly, but he had a couple of seasons under him. These guys that Macrae has, Kelly's played 2 games, hasn't he? Liam McMahon's played 0, Ash Johnson's played 0, Begg's only played 3 now. Who you keep position is, Darcy Moore, and then you have guys like Myercheck and Howe who have to play taller than they are. So the list is really, and you've made this point, there's so many holes in that list. And then you go to the midfield, it's like, well, who are your premier midfielders? Potentially the Goey, maybe. Adams tries, but he's flawed. Pendlebury's 34. Sidebottom is really struggling now.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity with Sidebottom, we talked about this during the game. What is it with Sidebottom that the commentators will ignore him kicking directly to an opponent or kicking on the full, and then the moment he hits someone on the chest, it's just about how beautifully skilled he is.
Oh, it's staggering. I really don't see the same player that they see. It's fantasy stuff. He's not that good, and yet he's talked up like an A-grade mid. It's staggering.
Oh, it's insane. And I've said it all the time. So I think he's a much better forward than he is a mid. But
Oh yeah, definitely. But he'll never get up there. No, the platitudes are just insane. But I think that's just commentary. I think you're better off served when you're watching Channel 7 just to turn the volume down. You just don't get a balance. It's all showmanship. It's just nonsense. Everything's over the top, wonderful. There's no analysis of the game. Like even Hodge, he's not really giving you anything of merit. And Daisy Pearce, I think, gives you the most.
I was just going to say she's the best of those. I mean,
observations on it. But
I had fucking James Brayshaw telling me until about the half time. He said it about 9 times. But Collingwood's playing new style under McRae. It's like, okay, we're in round 9. Do we still need to be told this, you fucking idiot?
Oh, it's like, we flip-flopped around that 28-point margin. And how many times did he fucking try and make out that it was game on? Now, this is a side that's fucking struggled to sling 2 goals together consecutively, was suddenly magically going to fucking concoct 5 or 6 to hit the lead. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's just madness. I mean, the commentary is really bad. Daisy Pearce is good. There's a few others. Like I like people like Nick Riewoldt and Brad Johnson. I think they're better on wherever the Fox or wherever the hell they are. A lot of Anthony Hudson. I saw him in another, or listened to him during another game. He was just, he was terrible. And most of them are just sort of there because that's just the default. Final thoughts on this game.
Just put a line through it and move on.
We'll try, but so we're playing Fremantle Sunday at 5:20 our time, I think, which will be what, 2:20 their time.
Over there, yeah.
2:20 1986 their time.
Well, they'll be nice and relaxed next week after their big win today.
Yes. That was the first thing I thought when I saw the scores. Like, Gold Coast smashed them. Jeez, well, they won the time, and they had some players out with what was it, COVID protocols or some shit? I don't know. But yeah, so they're going to come back hard, and they've been well drilled. I honestly can't see us getting within 10 goals.
No, Fife's back as well this week, isn't he?
Oh, probably Pavlich is back too. Who would you bring in? So Pendlebury
boots on this week.
Pendlebury presumably will come back, and Ginnivan will come back. I've been saying it forever. Cox needs to ruck. This guy can ruck. He's been dominating in the reserve since he, was given that job. We know as a forward he's problematic. We've always said here on the Rant that he's going to be problematic as a forward because, he plays that position like a ruckman does. I've seen criticism of him say, if we play him as a ruck, he'll get 3 possessions and 10, he'll drop 10 marks and all that. It's like, I don't give a fuck. If he can get his hand to a tap and get 10 of them to a teammate, that's all I want. And the 10 that he doesn't get to his teammate, this is the one thing I'll give credit to Grundy for. The one thing I've realized in the last few weeks is like, okay, at least Grundy negates the opposition ruck to some extent. Whereas since he's been injured, the opposition ruck has just seemed to have like a clear run at the ball and just been able to tap it with very little, I don't know what you call it, defensive pressure from our ruckman. Yeah. So play Cox, and if all he does is get 50 taps and gets 10 of them to his teammates, fuck, I don't care if he drops a few marks.
Yeah, I think you've got to go with Cameron and Cox this week, definitely. Who's is Sandiland still rucking for Freo? He's still good for a few more games, isn't he?
No, he'll be back. Yeah, and that actually, I think Cameron's actually slowly improved when he's been given the mantle, but I really, he looks to me more like a forward than a ruck, whereas Cox has always looked like a ruck to me rather than the forward. So I really hope they play him, but I can't see us getting within 10 goals. We're just really, I think the confidence is shot too now. It's like that they won those first 3 games and they thought, well, how good are we traveling? And they lost to Geelong, and after they lost to Geelong, it was like, oh, we're vulnerable. But then they've had some losses since that, which is just showing them we're not quite as good as we think we are.
No. It's all about the picks, though, mate. That's you got to console yourself with that.
Well, let's be clear. I mean, we'll talk about it at some other point, but it's just like, okay, you go to draft, you get pick 4. Okay, what's that going to address? One position, you got 12 that have problems.
No, and that's the concerning thing, which is, again, why it makes me think that maybe Deggs' value could mean, if you played it right, you could end up with 3 first rounders, or at least 2 and a good second rounder.
But they need to be honest about when they think their turnaround is. If they still think they're 2 years away, and that guys like Pendles and Howe and Roughhead and all that are going to be in that, it's like, okay, well, go get your free agents like Mustay and all those sort of players. But it really shows that, this team...
They're fucking deluded if they go the quick fix route.
But it's very much, it reminds me very much of the Tommy Hafey teams of the 70s and 80s, where it's just pieced together from all these parts, and it's good and it's competitive and it fights with that Collingwood spirit, but it's never actually good enough to win a flag.
How many times you need to fail at this to realise that it's a mistake? Go down for 2 or 3 years and build something magical and dominate for 6 or 7 years.
Oh, well, you've done it to dominate, for even longer than that. But I really am worried the profile of the list in terms of age and all that, it's in this really messy place where you almost have to just say, look, there's going to be 3 years of shit because we need to get draft picks in, and these old guys are going to go, and there's no one coming up. And after Pendlebury and Roughhead and Howe go, because they're all, post 30, who are you bringing up to replace them?
On that, and that's the alarming thing. There's just nobody coming through.
And it's like I always draw that comparison with the 206 to 2010 squads, where you had guys like Wakelin, Presti, Bucks, Burns, Lucuria retiring, but then you had Pendles, Daisy, Reed, Brown, Travis Cloak there. You had these guys coming up and playing regularly. So, and then you had guys like Swan and that sort of, and Heath Shaw. You had guys who were playing and getting games and experience, and they were quality players. I mean, 2010 midfield is far superior to 202 midfield. And, that was the transition between those two squads. So they actually built something much stronger, but they had the collateral to do it. They don't have that now. So that's the really concerning thing. So, even if they hit free agency, it's like, how many free agents can you hit that are going to improve that side? The only thing you can really do is if you go out and hit up all these mid-tier players. But again, where's that going to take you?
You're really hoping that you're just going to land a whole bunch of Mia checks.
Well, that's what they're really hoping. I mean, that's what seems their strategy when they picked up, McRae and Henry and all those guys. It's like a couple of these guys will be elite. They won't just be good, they'll be elite. And I understand and appreciate that, because of COVID, the lower tier competitions weren't giving you an accurate reflection of talent. So some of those guys might have actually slipped through. But, generally in the draft, the top 5 is where the quality players are. And then sometimes, better players, you can pick them up later. But we're expecting to pick up like pretty much a whole squad with lower picks, which is just madness. Final thoughts?
On the Freo game?
On anything. I don't care.
Well, yeah, I think if we got away with a 10-goal loss this week, it'd be a good get out. I'd like to see a few players just start to have a really good look at themselves rather, and say, I want to be here, and really show that commitment and effort to do it. You may still get smashed, but you want to see them try. You want to see some evolution of a system. Like that chaos one at the start of the year was beautiful to watch when it was on song, but it's all but vanished in the last couple of weeks. I think we had a period against the Dogs where we came back, and you sort of thought, oh, well, they've got the momentum here. But the thing is, you shouldn't be making up that much of a deficit in the first instance.
No.
Getting blown away in the first quarter just doesn't help. And I think, look, if we go in and arm wrestle in the first quarter against Freo, we probably come out of it reasonably okay. Well, we won't have a smashing, but we just can't go out there and get blown off the park and then play catch up every week. It's mentally taxing and physically taxing. It's not going to help us moving forward.
Well, what the Dogs did to us in that first quarter is what Geelong did to us in the last quarter, and which other teams have done to us in fits and spurts. St Kilda did it, and we were 5 goals up, and they came back to within. I think they actually got the lead. So it's actually happened with other sides. And the other thing too is you look at someone like, and I brought this up the other week in our new segment, how the fuck did we lose to West Coast? Because I believe they lost again just by 74 points.
Did they? Oh, it was a close one then.
Yeah, close one. And I'd also brought up the fact that Essendon are terrible. I mean, they got smashed by the Swans, and we struggled to win that. I know they beat Hawthorn, but geez, we know where Hawthorn's expected to be bottom 5 also. So it just doesn't seem that we have the capacity to impress upon any contest, any consistency, because it just always seems an arm wrestle. And it's very much like under what happened with Buckley too. It's very much like, we're 5 goals up and I don't feel safe. I don't feel this team can close it out.
No.
So that's for me a really big concern. And, some of that's system, some of that's personnel, but I don't know if we're going to be able to arrest that with the ingredients that we have at the moment.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Anyway, that's it from us. Hopefully we'll be back on screen next week.
Yeah, I can't see any reason why not, unless you cop it.
Oh, well, you did sneeze before.
Well,
so.
Technically, I'm immune then, so I can pretty much walk around with godlike powers, I think. Isn't that how it works?
Yeah, but I really, well done to you, Spook. You did the right thing. You isolated. And we had to record this as a podcast. Well done. You can pass that beer. Oh, sorry. Foot rock. Sorry, you didn't hear that, Dan.
Yeah. All right. Let's
Later.
All right. Catch.